In the days when the island of Éire was young and the boundary between the mortal world and the other world grew thin as morning mist, there lived a god who made a choice that would unmake him, and a woman whose love would shake the foundations of the earth itself. What I am about to tell you is a tale of that terrible choice, of pride that reached too high and love that reached deeper still, and of the blood price that must always be paid when the immortal dares to taste mortality. Listen well, for this happened in the time before. Time was carefully measured, when the Tuatha Dé Danann still walked openly upon the green hills of Ireland, and the children of Danu had not yet retreated into their hollow mounds beneath the earth. The god's name was Ailill Bright-Spear, and he was among the most radiant of the Tuatha Dé, beautiful beyond the telling of it, with hair like beaten copper and eyes that held the gray-green of storm-tossed seas. He was the god of the dawn's first light, the one who drove back darkness each morning with his silver spear, and in all the halls of the otherworld there was no warrior his equal, no singer whose voice rang more sweetly, no heart more wild with the terrible joy of immortal life. But Ailill Bright-Spear had grown weary. It happened slowly at first, as such things do. 1,000 mornings he had brought the sun's first light to the world. 10,000 battles he had fought and won, and always, always, the same songs echoed in the halls of Tir na Nog, the land of youth, where the Tuatha Dé feasted and made merry, and knew neither age nor ending. The wine tasted the same, cup after cup, through centuries that blurred together like paint running in rain. The victories meant nothing when defeat could never truly come. The songs had lost their power to stir him, for what tragedy could touch those who could not die? What triumph mattered when everything would be exactly the same tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow, stretching into an infinity that had begun to feel not like blessing but like curse? He began to watch the mortals. From his high seat in the otherworld, Ailill would look down upon the children of Meal, the human folk who had come from distant shores to settle upon Ireland's green breast. He watched them labor in their fields, watched them love and quarrel and grow old, watched them face each day as if it were precious beyond measure, because they knew, bone deep, that their days were numbered. He saw them weep over their dead, saw them rage against the dying of the light, saw them clutch their brief moments of joy with a ferocity that no immortal could match. And he envied them. It was this envy that led him, one morning when the world was still dark and waiting for his spear to bring the dawn, to the dwelling of the Dagda, the good god, the father of his people, the all-knowing one who sat at the head of the great feast table in the otherworld. The Dagda was ancient beyond reckoning, his beard the color of winter clouds, his eyes deep as wells. He knew the secrets of life and death, of making and unmaking, and he knew, too, what was in Ailill's heart before the younger god spoke a word. "You wish to walk among them," the Dagda said, and it was not a question. Ailill stood before the throne, his silver spear held loosely at his side, and felt the weight of the Dagda's gaze upon him. "I wish to know what it is to matter, Father of Hosts. I wish to feel what they feel, to earn my joy instead of simply having it, to face the darkness knowing that it might consume me." The Dagda was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with sorrow. "You speak of throwing away the greatest gift. We are beyond death, beyond suffering, beyond the terror of the ending. Why would you trade eternity for a handful of seasons?" "Because a handful of seasons lived truly might be worth more than eternity lived hollow," Ailill replied, and his voice did not waver. The Dagda closed his eyes, and Ailill knew that the ancient god was looking into the many threads of fate, seeing the futures that might unfold from this moment. When he opened them again, there was pain there, and something that might have been pity. "If you do this thing," the Dagda said slowly, "there will be no returning. The moment you take on mortal flesh, you cease to be what you are. Your immortality will be burned away like morning mist. You will feel hunger and cold and pain. You will age, you will die. And when you die, you will not come back to us in glory. You will go where all mortals go, to the dark lands beyond the setting sun, and we will know you no more." "I understand," Ailill said. "Do you?" The Dagda leaned forward, and his voice grew hard as stone. Do you understand what you will lose? The wars we will fight without you? The songs that will have no one to sing them? Your brothers and sisters of the Tuatha Dé who will grieve for you as if you had fallen in battle? You are not some minor spirit of stream or stone. You are Ailill Bright-Spear. You bring the dawn itself. If you abandon your duty, who will take up your spear? Someone will, Ailill said. Someone always does. But I cannot carry it any more, not with this emptiness inside me. Let me go, Father of Hosts. Let me be mortal for whatever time is given me. Let me live a life that ends. The Dagda stared at him for what seemed like an age. Then slowly the ancient god nodded. So be it. But know this, Ailill, who was a god. You do not understand what you are choosing. Mortality is not some adventure you can step into and out of at will. It will break you. It will humble you. It will teach you things you wish you had never learned. And in the end, it will take everything from you. Everything I have is already nothing, Ailill said. I will take my chances with everything that might be. The Dagda raised one massive hand, and Ailill felt the power gathering around him like a storm. Then let it be done. But I will give you this warning, because I have loved you as a son. Hubris has a price, and the gods do not look kindly on those who reject their gifts. What comes of this choice, you have brought upon yourself. The power struck Ailill like a hammer blow, and he felt himself falling through layers of reality, through the shimmering veils that separated the otherworld from the mortal lands. His immortal flesh burned away, reformed, became something heavier, something that ached and hungered and shivered. His silver spear vanished from his hand, his radiance dimmed until he was simply a man, tall and copper-haired and beautiful still, but mortal now, fragile as glass. He struck the earth in a place of wild beauty, where green hills rolled down to a river that sang over white stones, and ancient oaks spread their branches like the arms of giants. The impact drove the breath from his lungs, and for the first time in his eternal existence, Ailill Bright-Spear knew pain. He lay there, gasping, feeling the damp earth beneath him, the cool wind on his skin, the terrible, wonderful weight of his new body. Everything hurt. Everything was strange. His senses, once sharp enough to count the stars in distant galaxies, were now limited to what his mortal eyes could see, his mortal ears could hear. But oh, the world smelled of things he had never noticed before, green and rich and complex, and the sound of the river was not just sound, but music, and the pain in his ribs and the hunger in his belly were real in a way that nothing had been real for longer than he could remember. He began to laugh, there on the ground, laughing and weeping at the same time, overwhelmed by the intensity of simply existing in a body that could be hurt and hungry and cold and alive. It was in this state that she found him. Her name was Éire, and she was the daughter of a small chieftain whose lands encompassed the valley where Ailill had fallen. She had come to the river to gather healing herbs, for she was skilled in the old plant knowledge, the green wisdom that women passed from mother to daughter in those ancient days. When she saw the stranger lying on the riverbank, laughing and crying like a madman, her first instinct was to run. But there was something about him, something in his face that made her pause. She approached carefully, like one might approach a wounded deer that could bolt or attack. "Are you hurt?" she called out. Ailill turned his head and saw her, and in that moment everything changed. She was not divine. She was not radiant with immortal light. She was simply a mortal woman, young and strong, with dark hair bound back from her face and eyes the color of good earth. She wore a simple dress of undyed wool and carried a basket over one arm. There was nothing about her that should have struck him like lightning, nothing that should have made his new mortal heart stutter and race. But she was real. By all the powers that had made him, she was so perfectly, completely real. I am not hurt," he managed to say, climbing to his feet. The world spun around him, and he staggered. In an instant she was there, her arm steadying him, and he felt the warmth of her touch like a brand. "You are not from this valley," she said, and it was a statement, not a question. Her eyes searched his face with a directness that would have been unseemly in the courts of the Otherworld, but that here, in this earthy mortal place, felt only honest. "Where did you come from?" "Far away," Ailill said, which was true enough. I am traveling. I seek a place where I might make a life for myself." She regarded him thoughtfully. His clothes, he realized, were strange to her eyes, finer than anything a common traveler would wear, though they had been torn and stained by his fall. His hands bore no calluses. He had the bearing of nobility, but no servants, no horse, no weapons. "You are running from something," she said at last. "No," Ailill replied. "I am running toward something, though I do not yet know what it is." Something in his voice must have convinced her, or perhaps it was simply that kindness was her nature. She made a decision, and Ailill would spend the rest of his life marveling at how casually mortals made such choices, throwing the dice of fate without knowing how they would land. "My father's hall is nearby," Éire said. "If you need food and rest, we can offer that much, but you will have to work for your keep if you wish to stay longer. We are not wealthy folk, and we do not feed the idle." "I will work," Ailill said, though he had never labored a day in his immortal life. "I am grateful for your kindness." She laughed at that, a sound like water over stones, bright and clear. "Thank me when you have eaten my father's porridge and slept on his hard benches. Come on, then, before the day grows old." He followed her through the valley, and with each step he felt his old life falling away behind him like a discarded cloak. The gods knew where he was certain of that. They would be watching, perhaps with pity, perhaps with scorn, perhaps with anger at his rejection of their great gift, but he did not care. For the first time in ages beyond counting, he was walking a path whose end he could not see, and the uncertainty of it was intoxicating. Éteinne's father was a man called Conn, gray-bearded and strong despite his years, with the careful eyes of one who had defended his lands against raiders and rival claimers more than once. He looked at Ailill with suspicion when his daughter brought the stranger into the hall, but he did not turn him away. Hospitality was sacred in those days, a duty that superseded suspicion. "You have a warrior's bearing," Conn said, studying Ailill across the fire that burned in the center of the hall, "but no weapons. You have the hands of a noble, but you travel alone. Tell me truly, stranger, what brings you to my lands?" Ailill met the chieftain's eyes and felt the weight of mortal judgment in a way he never had before. In the Otherworld, he had been beyond question, beyond doubt. Here he was simply a strange man who had appeared from nowhere, and he would be measured by his actions, not his divine nature. "I am seeking a new life," Ailill said, and in that moment he made another choice that would ripple out through the years to come. "I have left behind all that I was, and I wish to become something different. If you will have me, I will serve your household faithfully. I can fight, though I have no weapon. I can learn whatever other skills you need. I ask only for food and shelter and the chance to prove my worth." Conn was silent for a long moment, weighing the words. Then he nodded slowly. "Winter is coming, and we can always use another strong back. But know this, I will not tolerate thieves or oath-breakers in my hall. If you prove false, I will drive you out myself, and you will find no welcome in this valley. Do you swear to be true?" "I swear it," Ailill said, and felt the words bind him in a way that divine oaths never had. This was not the casual promise of an immortal. This was a mortal vow given before witnesses, with his fragile life as surety. "Then you may stay," Conn said. "My daughter will show you where you can sleep." And so Ailill Bright-Spear, who had been a god, became simply Ailill, a landless man who slept on a bench in a chieftain's hall and woke before dawn to labor in the fields. The work nearly killed him those first weeks. His divine grace was gone, and his new mortal body had to learn everything from the beginning. He did not know how to hold a scythe properly, did not understand the rhythm of the harvest, could not tell good grain from bad. His hands blistered and bled. His back ached in ways he had not known possible. He who had fought demons and great beasts collapsed into exhausted sleep each night, too tired even to dream. But he learned. Slowly, painfully, he learned. And through it all, Éire was there. She did not coddle him or make things easier. If anything, she was harder on him than the others, quick to point out his mistakes, sharp-tongued when he was clumsy. But she also showed him the right way to do things, patiently demonstrating again and again until his awkward mortal hands found their proper rhythm. She taught him which plants could heal and which could kill, where the fish gathered in the river, and how to read the weather in the flight of birds. She taught him, in other words, how to be human. And somewhere in those long days of labor and learning, as autumn turned the hills to gold and bronze, Ailill fell in love. It was not the instant burning passion of the old tales. It was quieter than that, deeper. It grew like roots, like the slow, certain growth of an oak from an acorn. He fell in love with the way she laughed when the harvest was good, with the fierce concentration on her face when she worked her healing magic, with the gentleness in her hands when she tended to injured animals or frightened children. He fell in love with her strength and her sharp mind and her utter, complete realness. And the terrible thing, the wonderful thing, was that she loved him back. He saw it in the way her eyes sought him out across the hall at night, in the way she saved him the best portions of the evening meal, in the way she grew quiet when he was near, as if words had become insufficient. Neither of them spoke of it at first. Both were waiting, circling around the truth like dancers around a fire. It was on the night of Samhain, when the veil between worlds grows thin and the dead walk among the living, that everything changed. The household had gathered around the great fire, telling stories of ancestors and heroes, of the Tuatha Dé Danann and the Firbolg, and all the ancient peoples who had walked Ireland's green hills. Ailill listened to them speak of his own former people, as if they were distant legends, abstract powers rather than the brothers and sisters he had known and left behind. It should have hurt, he thought, to hear himself erased from those stories, to sit there disguised in mortality while they spoke of divine Ailill Bright-Spear who brought the dawn. But it did not hurt, because Éire was sitting beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her, and that simple proximity meant more than all the glory he had abandoned. When the stories ended and the household drifted off to sleep, Éire touched his arm gently. "Walk with me," she said softly. "The night is clear, and I would speak with you." They walked out into the cold autumn darkness, away from the hall and down toward the river that sang its eternal song over the stones. The moon was full and bright, casting silver light across the water, and for a moment Ailill was overwhelmed by the beauty of it, by the fleeting perfection of this single moment in time that would never come again. "I must tell you something," Éire said, and there was something in her voice that made him turn to face her fully. "My father has been approached by Fergal, the chieftain from the Eastern Valley. He wishes to make an alliance through marriage. He wishes me to be his wife." The words struck Ailill like a physical blow. He stood there, speechless, as she continued. "My father has not yet given his answer. He wishes me to choose for myself, which is more kindness than many daughters receive. Fergal is not a bad man. His lands are rich, his cattle many. I would want for nothing. It would be a wise match." "And what do you wish?" Ailill managed to ask, though his voice sounded strange to his own ears. Éire looked up at him, and in the moonlight her eyes were bright with tears. "I wish you would tell me why a man with your bearing and your strength, with your strange knowledge and your beautiful words, comes to us with nothing. I wish you would tell me what you are running from. Because I have fallen in love with you, Ailill, no other name, and I do not know if I am a fool for it." The truth hung in the air between them, waiting to be spoken, and Ailill, who had once been a god and thought himself wise in all things, suddenly understood what the Dagda had tried to tell him. Mortality was not just about dying, it was about this, about standing before another person and making yourself vulnerable, about offering your heart knowing it could be broken, about choosing truth when lies would be safer. "I cannot tell you everything," he said slowly, "but I can tell you this. I came from a life where nothing mattered, where everything was hollow and empty, despite all its beauty. I came seeking something real, and I found it in you, Éire. I love you. I have never said those words before, not in all my long—" He caught himself. "Not ever before. And if you will have me, if your father will accept a landless man with no wealth and no great name, I will spend whatever days are given me trying to be worthy of you." She was crying openly now, and he reached out to brush the tears from her cheeks with his rough, calloused hands. "I will have you," she whispered, "though you come with nothing but the mystery that surrounds you, though I do not understand what you are or where you came from. I will have you, Ailill, and we will face whatever comes together." They were married 3 days later, with Con's blessing and the whole valley gathered to witness. It was a simple ceremony by the standards of the Otherworld, just words spoken before witnesses and gifts exchanged, and a feast that lasted until dawn. But to Ailill it meant more than all the grand rituals he had seen in the halls of the gods. This was a vow that would end when he ended, a promise with death as its horizon, and that made it precious beyond measure. For a time they were happy. Con gave them a small portion of land to work, and Ailill built them a house with his own hands, learning as he went, making mistakes and correcting them, laughing with Éire at his clumsiness, even as he slowly became more skilled. They planted crops in the spring and harvested them in the fall. They fished the river and tended to the few sheep that were their share of Con's flock. They lived the simple, grinding, beautiful life of mortals, and every day Ailill marveled at how much it meant, how deeply he could feel both the joys and the sorrows. Éire became pregnant in their first year together, and Ailill knew fear for the first time in his existence. Not the thrill of danger that he had felt in divine battles, but real fear, the crushing awareness that something precious could be lost, and he would be powerless to stop it. He watched her belly swell with their child and felt terrified and awed in equal measure. When she went into labor, he paced outside their small house like a caged animal, listening to her cries and feeling each one like a blade in his heart. For hours she labored, and he prayed to gods he no longer walked among, begging them to spare her, to let her live, to let the child live, promising anything, everything. The midwife emerged at last, and her face was grave. "The child is turned wrong," she said. "I have done what I can, but it is in the hands of fate now. You should go to her." He went inside to find Éire pale and exhausted, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. She reached for him, and he took her hand, and she gripped it with all her failing strength. "I am afraid," she whispered. "I am here," he said, though the words felt useless against the magnitude of what was happening. "I am here, and I will not leave you." "Promise me," she said urgently, her eyes searching his face. "Promise me that if it comes to choosing, you will save the child. Promise me." "No," Ailill said fiercely. "No, I will not promise that. I need you, Éire. I chose mortality for this, for you, and I will not—" "Promise me," she cried out, and then the pain took her again, and she screamed. In that moment, Ailill understood the final truth of what he had become. As a god, he could have saved her with a thought, could have reached into her body and turned the child, could have poured divine vitality into her failing strength. But he was not a god anymore. He was just a man, as helpless as any mortal before the mysteries of birth and death. The night stretched on, eternal and terrible, and then, just before dawn, when Ailill had almost given up hope, he heard it, the thin, angry cry of a newborn child. The midwife emerged with a tiny bundle, a girl child, red-faced and squalling. "Your daughter lives," she said, and there was wonder in her voice. "And your wife. She is weak, but she breathes. They both live. It is more than I dared hope for." Ailill took his daughter in his shaking hands and looked down at her tiny, perfect face, and wept with a relief so profound it shook him to his bones. He brought her to Éire, who was barely conscious but managed to smile when she saw the child. "We will call her Éire," Éire whispered. "Little Éire." "Little Éire," Ailill repeated, and the name felt like an anchor, tying him even more firmly to this mortal life. The years passed, and they were good years. Éire grew from infant to child, bright and curious and full of laughter. 2 more children followed, a son they named Éire and another daughter called Muin. Étienne's strength returned, though she was never quite as robust as she had been before Aine's difficult birth. Ailill's hands grew more calloused, his back stronger, his understanding of mortal life deeper. He had been human for 7 years when the gods came for him. It was summer, and he was working in the fields when he felt it, a shiver in the air that he had not felt since the day he fell from the other world. The hairs on his arms stood up, and he knew, without knowing how he knew, that something was wrong. He dropped his scythe and ran toward the house. They were waiting for him in the yard. 3 of them, blazing with divine radiance that made the summer day look dim by comparison. He knew them instantly, though 7 mortal years had passed. Brid of the Fire, Lugh of the Long Arm, and Midir the Proud, his brothers and sisters, the Tuatha Dé Danann, the people of the goddess Danu. Ailill, Brid said, and her voice was like music and sorrow together. "O Ailill, look what you have become." He stood before them in his rough homespun clothes, his copper hair streaked now with the first threads of gray, his hands rough and his face weathered by sun and wind. By mortal standards, he was still a young man, but by the standards of the Tuatha Dé, he was already visibly dying. "What do you want?" he asked, though his voice was steadier than he felt. Behind him in the house he could hear Étienne moving about, could hear the children playing, his family, his mortal, fragile, precious family. "We have come to give you a choice," Lugh said. His face was stern, beautiful, and terrible. "The Dagda took pity on you, fool though you have been. He has agreed to restore what you cast away. You can come back to us, Ailill. You can be immortal again. You can take up your spear and bring the dawn. All you have to do is leave this behind and return with us to Tir na Nog." For a moment, just a moment, Ailill felt the pull of it. To be free of pain and age and the constant gnawing fear of loss. To be radiant again, powerful again, to feel the thrill of immortal battle and hear the songs that never ended. To not have to watch Étienne grow old and die. To not have to face the knowledge that he would lose everything he loved. Then Aine ran out of the house, laughing, chasing a butterfly with her small hands outstretched, and the moment passed. "No," Ailill said. Midir stepped forward, anger flashing in his divine eyes. "You are a fool, Ailill. You are dying. Can you not see it? Can you not feel mortality eating away at you? In another 30 years, if you are lucky, you will be dust and bones. Everything you are will be gone. And for what? For this?" He gestured dismissively at the small house, the children, the simple life spread out before them. "Yes," Ailill said firmly. "For this." "They will die too," Midir pressed. "Your wife, your children, all of them will age and wither and return to the earth. And you will watch it happen, powerless to stop it. Is that what you want? Is that the great prize you traded immortality for?" "You do not understand," Ailill said, and he felt pity for his old companions, pity for the gods who had never tasted mortality. "You think death makes things worthless. But it is the opposite. Death makes everything precious. Every moment matters because there will not be infinite moments. Every touch, every word, every sunrise is unrepeatable and therefore beyond price. I would rather have 30 mortal years with Étienne than an eternity without her." Brid looked at him with something that might have been understanding or might have been sorrow. "Then it is truly done," she said softly. "You are lost to us, Ailill Bright-Spear. You are mortal now in truth, and we will not come for you again." "I was never yours to keep," Ailill replied. "I am where I choose to be." The 3 gods looked at him for a long moment, and he saw in their faces confusion and pity and anger and something else, something that might have been the faintest glimmer of envy. Then they faded like morning mist, leaving only the scent of otherworldly flowers behind. Étienne came out of the house, Fiachra balanced on her hip. She looked at the empty yard, at Ailill standing there with his hands clenched at his sides, and he saw that she knew, or at least suspected, what had just happened. "Are you well?" she asked quietly. "I am," he said, and it was true. "I am exactly where I wish to be." She smiled at him, and Éire ran over to grab his hand, chattering about the butterfly she had almost caught, and Ailill lifted his daughter onto his shoulders and felt the weight of her, solid and real and temporary and absolutely perfect. The years continued their relentless march. Ailill watched his children grow, watched Conn grow old and die, watched the seasons turn their endless wheel. He and Étaín celebrated 20 years together, then 25. Their children married and had children of their own. Ailill's hair went from copper streaked with gray to silver, and his back grew bent from years of labor, and his hands became gnarled with age, and through it all he was happier than he had ever been as a god. But fate, it seems, had not finished with him. It came in their 30th year together, when Ailill was an old man by mortal standards, though his eyes still burned with something that was not quite mortal, not quite divine. A sickness swept through the valley, taking the young and old alike. They called it the wasting fever, and there was no cure for it, no herb or prayer that could turn it aside. Étaín fell ill on a cold spring morning. Ailill sat by her bedside as the fever consumed her, bathing her forehead with cool water, holding her hand, watching helplessly as the woman he loved was slowly taken from him. Their children came and went, bringing their own children to say farewell to the grandmother who had loved them. But mostly it was just the two of them, as it had been at the beginning. On the third night of her illness, Étaín woke from her fever dreams and looked at Ailill with clear eyes. "I have always known," she said softly, her voice thin and weak, "that you were not wholly what you seemed. There was always something about you, something that did not quite fit, like a great eagle trying to live as a sparrow." Ailill felt his heart clench. "Étaín." "No," she said, raising one trembling hand to touch his face. "Let me speak while I still can. I do not know what you were before you came to me. I do not know what you gave up or what you were running from. But I know this. You chose me. You chose this life. And it has been a good life, Ailill. It has been enough." Tears were streaming down his weathered face. "It is not enough," he said brokenly. "I need more time. You need to let me go," Étaín whispered. "As I let you go, should you die first. This is what it means to be mortal, my love. This is the price we pay for having loved at all." "I would pay any price," Ailill said. "Any price but this." She smiled at him, and even now, even dying, she was beautiful to him. "You already paid it," she said. "You paid it the moment you chose to be human. You knew this would come. You knew we would end. And you chose it anyway, chose me anyway, and that is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." She died just before dawn, slipping away so quietly that at first Ailill did not realize she was gone. He sat there holding her hand as the light began to creep through the window, the light that he had once brought to the world with his silver spear, and he understood at last what the Dagda had tried to tell him all those years ago. Mortality was not an adventure, it was not a game, it was real and terrible and final, and it broke you in ways that could never be mended. They buried Étaín on a green hill overlooking the river where they had first met. Their children and grandchildren gathered around, grieving, and Ailill stood apart from them, feeling the weight of his years and his choices pressing down on him like a physical thing. That night, alone in the house that felt too large and too quiet without her, Ailill wept as he had never wept in all his long existence. He wept for Étaín, for the years they would not have together, for the grandchildren she would not see grow. He wept for himself, for the god he had been and the man he had become, for the loneliness that stretched before him like an empty road, and somewhere in the depths of his grief he felt it, a presence, vast and ancient and knowing. The Dagda stood before him, not in flesh but in vision, the ancient god's face full of sorrow and wisdom and something that might have been respect. "You understand now," the Dagda said, and it was not a question. "Yes," Ailill whispered, "I understand. Do you regret it? Do you regret the choice you made?" Ailill looked up at the god he had once called father, at the immortal being who had never known the pain of true loss, and he spoke from the depths of his broken mortal heart. "No," he said, not for a single moment. The pain I feel now is the price of the love I knew, and I would pay it 1,000 times over for those 30 years. She was worth it. This life was worth it. Even the ending, terrible as it is, was worth it. The Dagda was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "You have learned something that even the gods do not know," he said. "You have learned what it means to truly live. I thought you a fool when you left us, Ailill. But perhaps the fool was I for not understanding what you sought." "Will I see her again?" Ailill asked. "When I die, will I go to where she has gone?" "I do not know," the Dagda admitted. "The land of the mortal dead is not a place we gods can go. But I think that if love has any power at all, if the bonds we forge in life mean anything beyond life, then you will find each other. Not as you were, perhaps, but as something new, something beyond even my understanding." The vision faded, and Ailill was alone again. But the Dagda's words stayed with him, a small comfort in the vast darkness of his grief. He lived for 5 more years after Étain's death. He grew frailer, more bent, his copper hair gone completely to silver and then to white. His children cared for him with love and patience, and his grandchildren brought him joy even in his sorrow. He told them stories of their grandmother, of the woman who had loved a strange man who came from nowhere and asked for nothing but the chance to be human. On the last night of his life, Ailill lay on his bed in the small house he had built with his own hands, and he felt the final darkness gathering around him. His daughter Éire sat beside him, holding his hand, and around her stood his other children and their children, all the lives that had come from his choice to become mortal. "Do not grieve too deeply," he told them, his voice barely a whisper. "I have lived more fully in these 35 years than in all the ages that came before. I have known love and pain and joy and sorrow, and it was all of it, precious beyond measure." As the darkness closed in, Ailill thought he saw a light in the distance, warm and welcoming, and walking toward him from that light, her hand outstretched, her smile as bright as he remembered, was Étain. He reached for her with his gnarled old hand, and as their fingers touched, he felt himself transformed one final time, not back to divinity, but forward into something new, something he had no name for. All he knew was that she was there, and he was there, and they were together, and that was enough. Ailill Bright-Spear, who had been a god and chose to be a man, died with a smile on his weathered face. And in the moment of his passing, those who were there swore they saw a light, brief as a heartbeat, bright as the dawn, flicker across the sky one last time. They buried him beside Étain on the green hill, and over the years their grave became a place of pilgrimage. Young lovers would come there to pledge their vows, seeking the blessing of the god who had loved a mortal woman enough to become mortal himself. Old couples would visit to renew their promises, drawing strength from the story of a love that had lasted beyond death itself. And sometimes, on quiet mornings when the mist rises from the river and the world is caught between sleeping and waking, people say you can see them there on the hillside, walking hand in hand. A man with copper hair and a woman with eyes like good earth, young again, or perhaps old, or perhaps something beyond both youth and age. They are only there for a moment, a trick of the light perhaps, or a dream that wanders into waking. But those who see them always feel the same thing, a sense of peace, and the certainty that some loves are strong enough to bridge any divide, even the one between mortality and eternity. This is the tale of Ailill Bright-Spear, the god who walked among mortals and found in their brief, fragile lives something worth more than immortality. It is a tale of hubris and humility, of sacrifice and transformation, of the terrible, wonderful price we pay for choosing to love what cannot last forever. Remember it well, and when you face your own choices between what is safe and what is real, between what endures unchanging and what blazes bright and brief, remember Ailill, and choose with a full heart. For in the end it is not the length of our days that matters, but the depth of our living, and the courage to embrace what is precious, even knowing that we must someday let it go.